Chapter 6, Section 5 is, of course, the last section of Chapter 6, and it's going to talk about the Greco-Roman legacy of civilization and how what the Romans did kind of leads into some of the modern things that we do today. Capital letter A is going to be the definition of Greco-Roman culture. It's also known as classical civilization or also classical culture, and it's basically the mixture of Greek, Hellenistic, and Roman culture. Roman fine arts were something that they specialized in. They took the art of sculpture from the Greeks, but they actually created more realistic portraits. If you remember when we learned about the Greeks, we said that they tried to focus on ideal beauty, and classical art in Greece was focused on balance, order, proportion, while the Romans tried to show things in a more realistic light. They also practiced something called bas relief, which is known as low relief. It's where images are projected from a flat background. It's used to tell stories, represent crowds of people, soldiers in battle, landscapes, etc. I'll show you an example here. It's located in your textbook on page 185 on the end of chapter questions page. It's right here. This is an example of bas relief. You see that there's a flat background, but the objects are here showing a major battle scene here and depicted in more of a 3D light projecting off of the flat background. We'll move this back up as we're going to take a look at a couple of other things as we make it through today's lesson. Now, they also had mosaics. Mosaics are pictures or designs made by setting small pieces of stone, glass, or tile onto a surface. Stained glass windows at churches are an example of that. Point number 4 is going to talk about the city of Pompeii. Pompeii is a city with evidence of Roman artwork that was semi-preserved by ash from a volcanic eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. The ash preserved many buildings and works of art that help us understand how Romans may have lived. In fact, just this week, archaeologists have discovered a human brain that had some intact cells that they have discovered. Now, I don't know the ins and outs of that, but what I'm saying is the ash that covered entirely the city of Pompeii from the volcanic eruption of Mount Vesuvius preserved many things, and we have learned a great deal about how Romans lived from digging in the soil and regions there. Next is capital letter C. We'll talk about learning and literature. Romans emulated the Greeks in philosophy and literature as well. Virgil was a famous Roman poet who wrote the Aeneid. It's an epic that was modeled off of Homer's poems. Livy was a historian that compiled a multi-volume history of Rome from its origins to 9 BC. Tacitus is one of my favorite figures. He's a Roman historian. He's notable for presenting the facts accurately, and he was also concerned about morality. So he tried to tell the truth, is what I'm trying to get at there. His famous book is called Annals and Histories of Rome. One of the great things about Tacitus is that if you are studying Jesus Christ, you know that we have the 4 Gospels in the Bible, but there's really not a whole lot of historical evidence outside of the Bible that talks about Jesus Christ. Well, Tacitus mentioned Christ in his books. And so it gives us, because he was a notable historian that presented the facts accurately and honestly and was, required to be concerned about morality, I think that him mentioning Christ is a great sign that Christ was a historical figure. Roman numeral 2 talks about the legacy of Rome. So what are some of the things that we really want to remember about the Roman world? Well, the Latin language was the official language of the Romans, and it was the official language of the Catholic Church into the 20th century. It led into the Romance languages, which really just kind of talks about languages that derive off of Latin, like Spanish, Portuguese, French, so on and so forth. Next is going to be the master builders, capital B. One of the big things that the Romans are known for is their engineering and architecture. They combined the dome, the arch, and concrete to build their structures. One of the most famous structures that they created are called the aqueducts. These are bridge-like structures that channel water into cities and towns. Now, the Romans were not the first and the only to have aqueducts, but they were the first to have them on such a very grand scale. Let me take a look at aqueducts. This is an example of aqueducts right here. It's a bridge-like structure. This one's located in France. At the very top here, there's a pipe, an opening where the water would run through. And then people can also travel on these as well. But the main purpose of creating these were to channel water from the distant mountains into the cities and towns. System of law is another thing that I think Romans should definitely be remembered for. The main idea in Roman law is that it emphasized standards of justice that were fair and equal for all people, rich and poor. On page 183 of your book, it has a list of bullet points that really emphasize Roman law and what it was meant to preserve. So some of the things here that you would want to know: all people had the right to equal treatment under the law. A person was considered innocent until proven guilty. We still practice that. The burden of proof rested with the accuser rather than the accused. A person should be punished only for actions, not thoughts. Any law that seemed unreasonable or grossly unfair should be set aside. So those are some of the factors there of Roman system of law. And then here is the Coliseum. Now, we learned about this in a previous section when we talked about entertainment. But one of the interesting things, this is what the Coliseum looks like today. Now, it opened in 80 AD, and what they would do here is they'd have gladiator fights, chariot racing, all types of things. They had elevators that would lift up animals like tigers and bears and everything else. They had underground traps. They had a semi-retractable roof called the Valerium, which was a canvas that would shield the spectators from the sun and the rain. They had the arena floor here, seating all through, walkways and passages that led up to the seats, just like a modern stadium is predicated on today. But I think that this was actually a magnificent structure, and it was built from the time of 72 to 81 AD. It holds about 50,000 spectators. It's made out of stone and concrete. It's 157 feet high and about 620 feet long. The arena floor was 287 feet long and 180 feet of width. Now, the way that they retracted that was down at the ground level with these tourniquets here. They would pull these around on pulley systems, and that would lower and raise the Valerium. Also, one of the interesting things that not a whole lot of people know is that at times they would flood the Coliseum floor. They would fill it with water all the way up to the top of the first level of seating, and they would reenact naval battles with miniature versions of ships. I think that's really, really interesting. This is kind of a brutal place, though. They would fight to the death in the gladiator arena here. All right, that's going to be the end of section 5, which ends chapter 6. The next chapter will go into chapter 7, which will be about Asia, India in particular, and China in particular.